Picture this. A duke and duchess step off a plane. They're whisked away in a security convoy. They visit a children's hospital, the same one his grandmother opened back in 1963, and his parents visited in 1985. Crowds line the hallways. People cry. Kids hand them flowers. Cameras are everywhere. Sounds like a royal tour, right? Except it's not. At least, that's what they keep telling us. Harry and Meghan landed in Melbourne, Australia today, and the question everyone is asking, from Buckingham Palace all the way to the streets of Sydney, is if they gave up being royals, why does absolutely everything about this trip look, feel, and smell like a royal tour? That's exactly what we're breaking down today. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this trip is so much bigger than just Harry and Meghan, and why the palace is watching every single move they make. To understand why this 2026 trip is so controversial, you have to go back to 2018. Harry and Meghan came to Australia as brand new newlyweds, fresh off their fairy tale Windsor wedding. They were working royals, representing the crown, and Australia went absolutely crazy for them. They walked down the steps of the Sydney Opera House hand in hand. They cuddled koalas. They hit Bondi Beach. Kids ran up to hug them. The Prime Minister rolled out the red carpet. It was, by every measure, a triumph. Oh, and Meghan announced she was pregnant with Archie the moment they landed on Australian soil. That's how much goodwill they had. The timing was perfect, the optics were flawless. That was 8 years ago, a lifetime ago, back when they were still fully inside the firm, protected by the palace, funded by the crown, and beloved by the Commonwealth. Then 2020 happened. In January of that year, Harry and Meghan shocked the world. They announced they were stepping back as senior royals, moving to California and becoming financially independent. They gave up their publicly funded roles. They gave up the protection of the institution. And in return, they kept their titles, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, even as they began publicly criticizing the very family those titles came from. Since then, they've built what insiders call brand Sussex. Netflix deals, Spotify deals, a lifestyle brand called As Ever, a show called With Love Meghan, speaking engagements, the whole thing. But here's the problem they can never escape. Every single thing they sell, every event they headline, every stage they walk onto, it works because of those two words, Duke, Duchess. The titles they got from the family they walked away from. One expert put it plainly: the Sussex brand rests entirely on the royal heritage they claim not to want. Strip away the titles, and who exactly is showing up in Australia? So let's look at what this trip actually is, because the details matter. Harry and Meghan announced in March that they'd be coming to Australia for a mix of private, business, and philanthropic engagements, international business times. 4 days, 3 cities, Melbourne, Canberra, and Sydney. Day 1, a visit to Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital, engaging with patients in the adolescent medicine ward and a therapeutic garden. Harry's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, opened that same hospital in 1963. British brief. His parents, Charles and Diana, visited in 1985. This is textbook royal tour activity. Day 2, Harry heads to Canberra to visit the Australian War Memorial with Indigenous veterans. Day 3 includes a scar tree walk, an Aboriginal walking tour, and a visit to a youth mental health program. Day 4, sailing on Sydney Harbour with Invictus Australia, followed by a rugby match, the Australian Women's Weekly. Hospital visits, war memorials, Indigenous community engagement, sports events, charity work. If it walks like a royal tour and talks like a royal tour, you see where I'm going. One Australian journalist described their position perfectly: royals but not, private citizens but not, controversial but shouldn't be, the nightly. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where the controversy really kicks in. Layered into all that charity work is some very serious commercial activity. Meghan is reportedly receiving around $355,000 to headline a 3-day wellness gathering in Sydney. Ticket prices run from roughly £1,400 for standard admission up to £2,000 for VIP packages, GB News. Organizers of Harry's event later slashed prices by more than 50% in a rush to fill remaining seats, GB News. Not exactly a great look. Sources say Meghan also filed 12 new Australian trademarks for her As Ever brand ahead of this trip, new idea, essentially using the tour as a soft commercial launch in a brand new market. And then there's the taxpayer question. Local media reported that some policing costs would be covered by Australian taxpayers, sparking a protest petition signed by more than 45,000 people, NBC News. Their team insists the trip is privately funded, but the security bill? That lands on the public, which raises the obvious question: can you really claim to be a fully private citizen when your presence requires a government-funded security operation? Now, here's the part that makes this trip genuinely fascinating from a royal politics standpoint, because the palace is not just watching from a distance. A palace source confirmed they have eyes peeled and are closely watching the reaction the couple receive in Australia, the news. Royal expert Matt Wilkinson warned that success in Australia will be a dummy run and testing ground for a potential joint tour of the UK, the news. Let that sink in. If Harry and Meghan pull this off, if Australia receives them warmly, if the optics are good, if the crowds show up, it proves they can do this independently. And that terrifies the palace, because the next logical step is Britain itself. Royal expert Richard Fitzwilliams called the trip a faux royal tour, designed to boost their brand, adding that it is likely to upset the palace since Australia is one of the king's realms and had been penciled in for a future visit by William and Kate, who were last there in 2014, Geo News. Think about what that means. William and Kate haven't been to Australia in over a decade, and Harry and Meghan just walked in and took that space, without permission, without coordination. And the palace, as royal author Robert Jobson pointed out, can do a thing about it. There's not a lot they can do. They have no control. The Royal Observer. There's also the delicate issue of Australia's Republican debate. King Charles is head of state there, and constitutional sensitivities are never far from the surface. International Business Times. Harry and Meghan walking through Australian streets, drawing crowds and generating goodwill, is a complicated image for the monarchy to manage. And this brings us to the real tension that this whole trip exposes. A contradiction that Harry and Meghan have never been able to resolve. They left the royal family because they said the institution was damaging, controlling, and incompatible with their mental health and freedom. They wanted a normal life. They wanted independence. But their entire business model depends on not being normal. It depends on those titles. It depends on the history, the mystique, the recognition that only being born into or marrying into that family can give you. One expert described it as a conflict of interest, using titles to pursue private interests while insisting they are private citizens. The hospital visit is royal. The war memorial is royal. The Invictus sailing event is royal, in spirit. But the $355,000 speaking fee and the £2,000 wellness retreat tickets, that's something else entirely. And the result is this strange in-between world they occupy. Too royal to be ignored, not royal enough for the full treatment. Beloved by some, resented by others, and utterly impossible to look away from, which, if you think about it, might be exactly the point. So where does this all go? Insiders describe this as a make-or-break trip for brand Sussex. With their Netflix deal downgraded and commercial partnerships under pressure, they need Australia to work, not just for the headlines, but for the business. If the crowds show up, if the media coverage is warm, if Meghan's wellness retreat sells out and As Ever gains traction in a new market, this trip becomes a blueprint, a model for how they operate going forward. Independent, global, commercially funded, but draped in the unmistakable language and symbolism of royalty. And if it doesn't land, if the crowds are thin, the ticket sales disappoint, and the faux royal tour narrative sticks, then the gap between who they were and who they're trying to be gets a lot harder to bridge. The palace is watching, William and Kate are watching, the Australian public is watching, and honestly, so are the rest of us. Because whatever you think of Harry and Meghan, and people feel very strongly on both sides, this trip asks a question nobody has a clean answer to yet. Can you leave the royal family, keep the brand, and build something genuinely new? Or does the whole thing only work because of what you left behind? We'll find out this week. If you want me to cover how the rest of this Australia tour unfolds day by day, drop it in the comments below. And if you're new here, subscribe, because royal stories don't get more complicated or more interesting than this one. See you in the next video.